My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most fascinating figures of the last century. He led a progressive reform across the United States and even the world. And yet, as an adult, one of the things that I find most fascinating about him is that, unlike the history books or any raw footage you see of him will like you to believe, he wasn't exactly all black and white. There were many layers to the man you can't simply understand by watching the same 5-second clip of him every single year. But man, when I was a kid, I didn't know any of that stuff at all. I barely knew anything about Martin Luther King Jr., in fact. The only thing that I really did understand was that he was a man who did a lot more time traveling than you would otherwise presume.
When I was in elementary school, I always very much looked forwards to Martin Luther King Jr. Day every single year. Not because of any of the obvious reasons that anyone else on the planet would, but because we always got to watch a movie. The same movie. This movie. Wakey wakey, eggs and bakey, I say in a dated fashion to our dated main protagonist. Miles Woodman is a carefree student who is getting ready to go to school.
Later, Mom. I'm history.
Get it?
Miles is in trouble with his mom because he's been so concentrated on being athletic and into one particular sport that his grades are starting to dwindle. Miles' mom is a businesswoman who is achieving her dreams, meant to represent how things have changed. Also, she gives him a signed permission slip to an important field trip, meant to represent that he has an important field trip that he needs permission to go on. Miles sets out on his daily journey, but is antagonized by the neighborhood bully, who, according to Wikipedia, is meant to be the racist antagonist. But in reality, I think he just hates the main character. It's probably not because he's black. Hashtag equality. Miles is saved, however, when the crazy bus driver nearly kills both of them and then decides pretty much to purposefully leave the bully behind. Everyone in this universe hates this bully. It's probably why he's a bully.
Don't make me get out of this truck!
You tell him, Dad.
And as for you, I got better things to do than to drive you to school every stinking day.
Oh, now it all makes sense. His dad is Wheeler from Captain Planet.
I don't really know what they're going for with this scene. It's like they're setting up that the father is what makes him a bully slash racist. But like I said, there's nothing in the movie to really make him a racist, and everyone's basically just as mean to him as he is to everyone else. So you kinda just get around to doubting that he's even really a bully at all. It's in the classroom that we meet our secondary main characters. First of all, there's Randy, who is described on Wikipedia as a 12-year-old Caucasian skater. He's kind of a weird part of the film, because when you look at his design, it's clear what they were going for. But then you hear his voice, which sounds a lot more closer to Forrest Gump than Tony Hawk.
We're kicking it in this museum, and we got completely zapped to time, and You gotta excuse Randy. He doesn't get out much.
Hello? People are trying to learn here.
This is Maria, a character who's written and animated with a lot of personality, but performed with very little. Her gimmick is that she's pompously interested in being the best in the class, and she patronizes anyone below her while growing jealous of any person who threatens her position.
She doesn't learn any lesson in this movie.
So they start preparing for their MLK field trip, and of course, the only 4 characters with names so far are all placed together. Afterwards, their teacher asks to talk to Miles about his grades, and tells him that she is going to suggest he repeat the 6th grade if he doesn't start taking his studies more seriously. Starting with his report on Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King? What's there to know? He's famous for doing a bunch of good stuff for African Americans back in the day, and now we get his birthday off, right?
Miles, Dr. King opened up a whole new world for the entire country.
Ma'am, I think there might be something wrong with your chalkboard.
This teacher's quite the funny character because she's all progressive and cares about civil rights, but she's a white person with dreadlocks, and she only has dreadlocks because of the civil rights movement. So I'm pretty sure in this decade someone would call her racist. So the next day the class sets out on their tour of Martin Luther King Jr.'s home of birth, and during the tour Miles is distracted enough by a set of baseball-related artifacts that he sneaks his way into Martin's room. Caught in the act by the Whoopi Goldberg tour guide, she leaves them to roam after meticulously winding up one of Martin's old watches. Anyway, so then time travel happens. So the two land in the past, and they immediately recognize a figure who has bumped into them as Martin Luther King Jr. himself.
Boy, that's a nice jersey.
This is Hank Aaron's number. In my book, he was the greatest slugger of all time. He hit more home runs than Babe Ruth, 755.
Oh, right. I bet you're gonna tell me he's colored, too.
Why would you say that? No one would ever say that in a situation where they didn't know that time travel was happening.
So then the boys play some classical 1960s baseball with Martin and his friends. And it's all going well until they're discovered by the mother of the two boys that Martin is playing with.
If your daddy catches you, he'll tan your hides and give me all kinds of heck to boot.
Your husband would get burnt over this? Man, tell him to get a life.
There's something honestly slightly charming and hilarious about the interactions between the standard 1960s racist character and the blunt, forwards-thinking generic 90s characters.
I suggest you leave them Negroes alone, or the only hanging you'll be doing with them is from a tree.
Alright, I wasn't prepared for them to say something that real.
Miles and Randy consider the fact that it's odd how someone can despise them despite not knowing them, and they briefly agree that the best course of action is to hate them back just as much. Martin advises a different route.
My daddy says hate is rooted in fear, and the only cure for fear and hate is love. Now that's my pops. I gotta go.
But when they pick up his baseball glove and yell after him, they experience another time jump.
Excellent.
Get it?
So on the train, the boys run into none other than Martin himself, who explains that he's been saving up money for college since he's managed to graduate from high school early at the age of 15. If you ever watch this movie on your own, take note of how many times they recycle this way out of town joke. So the boys are invited by Martin to have dinner at his parents' house, where we truly see the towering persona that inspired King to seek out to be the person that we see him as today.
So, what are your friends going to do while we make our rounds later?
They can wait in my room.
Rounds.
Yeah, we hunt across the galaxy searching for a remaining Jedi to kill. You see, the joke here is that Martin Luther King's father in this is played by James Earl Jones, and James Earl Jones is most famous for playing Darth Vader in the underrated indie film series Star Wars.
So the boys go hang out in Martin's room while they wait for him to finish his rounds, and it's there that they fall into another time jump. Montgomery, Alabama, during the bus boycott. They go to a meeting led by Dr. King and attempt to prove to him that they are time travelers by describing things that had happened the year before.
Did you say 1956? Yeah. That means Hank Aaron was an all-star for Milwaukee last year.
That's right.
So in each scene, for every age, Martin is played by a different actor. And it's really distracting in this one because it's clearly the guy from Reading Rainbow, and he delivers pretty much every line like he's reading a story from Reading Rainbow.
A Negro woman named Rosa Parks was tired and refused to give up her seat on the back of the bus to a white person.
My favorite part about this movie when I was a kid was that the voices of Martin and the stock audio of Martin are so amazingly different.
Welcome to the march.
I still have a dream.
It's called a boycott.
I want young men and young women.
Your house. Somebody bombed your house.
My family.
What was that? Why did you do the transition like that? Does Martin Luther King have like that so Raven future vision?
Martin arrives at his house to discover that his family is safe and sound, but this racist attack on his livelihood makes many of his followers want to resort to equal violence against those who oppose change.
Anger is not the way. Mahatma Gandhi.
Excuse me, what did you just say?
Mahatma Gandhi.
I don't even think that's wrong, but it's still funny.
King encourages his followers to follow a path of peace, which immediately causes all of the white media establishment to appear and start interviewing King. Leaning against a cop car causes another disruption to the space-time continuum, as they are splintered to the Birmingham protests of 1963, a part which is edited very strangely, with cuts between real footage and animated segments, and a long period of time where we lose the point of view of our main characters. It's pretty close to feeling like a brainwashing segment, almost like we're supposed to see this odd hypermix as something devious on the part of the filmmakers. That or the main characters are so scarred by what they're seeing that they're having a hard time processing it in real time.
Okay, let's leave. Time travel just stopped being fun.
So the kids are teleported back to modern times and are lectured by Maria, as they are late for the bus. But as the pair leave, they agree to come back the next day to get into more crazy antics.
I think I'm gonna lose my lunch, and I haven't even eaten it yet.
What the hell, Maria? I didn't even say anything to you. So the boys are suddenly fairly good at discussing the history of Martin Luther King Jr., even of big events that they never witnessed or discussed. Perhaps they were so entranced by the events of their journey that they did more research at home. What the hell is up with these shots of reflective glasses? It looks so sinister, like this is giving this kid some sort of horrifyingly evil idea. Maria grows more suspicious, however, when now wait for it. There it is. There we go. Yeah, they're in the footage. 'Cause time travel, I guess. Look at that. They step outside of the boundaries of the shot. They enter from outside the aspect ratio. Did they put those cartoon characters over real people actually getting arrested? Why are these children marketing one of the darkest points in American history as some sort of cool field trip that they went on? I feel like even I'm allowed to get offended about this. This would be just about as convincing as if I took some sort of similar historical footage and I edited Scarce into it.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Scarce here.
Miles, Randy, that was you on the screen.
Get real.
So mildly relevant little anecdote here. When I was in high school, I think it was, we went on some sort of trip to Washington, D.C., and while we were there we saw this Martin Luther King Jr. documentary, right? And some of my friends noticed that in the crowd was a guy who looked a lot like me. Oh, here we go. Right there. And they found me in the crowd. It's pretty funny. Do you know how I didn't react to that? I didn't go, what? Time travel? Man, I didn't time travel to the 60s and hang out with Martin Luther. You crazy? What are you saying? You suggesting something? Oh man, nah, man, nah. What are you saying? You want to take this out back?
So Whoopi meets them at the door and lets them in, and when she sees the bully and Maria sneak in the back, she utters this masterpiece dialogue excerpt.
Great. Now I gotta give him the group rate.
Oh, that's her plan. To make learning fun for the kids. And then to stretch that learning out over a few days. And then to bill the parents.
So all the kids end up together in their room, and Miles realizes that the missing piece is the wound watch. And as Maria does the act, a painting comes alive and they all get sucked inside.
Help! Save me! Guys!
Help me, I'm gonna die. I'm so scared for my life.
Wow, even God hates this kid. So then the fat kid and Miles start to fight, before being stopped by Martin Luther King Jr. himself, who reminds them to keep a practice of nonviolence to make themselves out to be stronger people. So then Martin goes to give his big speech, allowing his voice and personality to suddenly shift.
I still have a dream.
Also, I won't be playing much of the speech's audio because apparently it's heavily copyrighted. My video can get claimed for playing too much audio of a Martin Luther King Jr. speech. That's kinda cucked. So then they meet their teacher? Wait, wasn't she like 30 before? How old is she? What?
Hi, I'm Joyce, but that's so old. I'm changing my name to
Sunshine?
Sunshine. Yeah.
What am I supposed to learn from this? She isn't like wise or anything in this segment. She's just like a hippie loser. Whatever, I don't fucking care. Cuts to a wide collage of stock images. I love this movie. To show the bully some love, Miles buys him a new shirt, which is the first in the movie to truly fit. Then they time travel back to the present, having learned something that they will take to the grave. But then they realize the truth, that Martin Luther King was assassinated, which I don't know how they didn't learn that when they learned all the other stuff. They decide to go back in time to show him the future so they can try to prevent his fate somehow.
Hey, Martin!
Miles? Randy? A second ago you just disappeared.
Yeah, and I wasn't even here to see that because my dad drove me away in his car. So they try to explain to MLK who he's going to grow up to be, and they ask him to come back to the future with them. At first, he's reasonably cautious.
Come back with us, Martin.
To the future? Sorry, but that's way past my curfew.
One day I would like to look at one of those long lists of brilliant Martin Luther King Jr. quotes, and I'd like to see that one on the list.
But when they arrive, something seems to be off, as only Miles and Martin truly appeared first, and when the bully and the other guy show up, they're acting fairly more hostile than before. Later, when they go for the bus, they're told that they're not allowed, and most of the people they come across are extremely hostile towards them. Hey Miles, in the future does this sepia overcast pop up a lot? Yeah, that's pretty common actually. So it turns out that the water fountains are still segregated because Martin was gone, and schools are segregated because of Martin being gone, and all the white people are racist all the time because of Martin being gone, and their teacher has lame hair again because of Martin being gone. That's a lot of shit to put on the shoulders of one kid.
Wait a minute. Brown v. Board of Education didn't even have anything to do with Martin Luther King Jr.
Also, women are treated like crap, apparently suggesting that since Martin Luther King Jr. never did the main tier civil rights movement, every other example of great social change after that was just basically cancelled.
I love time travel stories where the writer will assert that one figure not being around or not doing one thing will suddenly mean that that one thing just never gets done.
One of my favorite examples of this, as a quick detour, is this Back to the Future, the animated series episode that's all like, "Great Scott! Your brother has gone back in time, stopping Benjamin Franklin from discovering electricity and sending Hillbilly back to the Stone Age!" But Dad, that's just an urban legend. No one cares, you pussy!
Maria!
See?
Maria, it's me, Miles. What are you doing?
¿Qué? No comprendo, no hablo inglés.
You see, if Martin Luther King Jr. hadn't been around, Hispanics wouldn't know how to speak English.
Also, child labor laws have been a thing since like 1900. When Miles gets back to his house, he realizes that all of his stuff is gone. Furthermore, when his mom gets home, she no longer runs a firm or has a real job. Instead, she works as a maid.
So if you're a kid and you're watching this movie and your mom's a maid, do you just presume that you permanently live in a shitty timeline?
Through some pleading, Miles manages to talk his mom into letting Martin spend time at their house. It's a good thing that the evolution of sleeping bags wasn't negatively affected by the alternate timeline where Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't a significant historical figure. So yeah, then you're assassinated outside of a hotel. Some people say that it was the American government who did it, and there's pretty solid evidence to support that suggestion. Well, good night.
It must be because of me. Because I left my own time. Things have changed in your time.
You see, now we've exited the realm of exploring who Martin Luther King Jr. was as a person. Now the movie's just about Martin Luther King Jr. being confused by time travel.
Wait, no, don't give him the watch back. If you give Miles the watch back, how is Miles gonna find the watch in the museum to begin with?
You fool! What have you done?
So then Martin gets shot. This might seem like a strangely blunt transition, but as a kid, I think this really solidified for me the great sacrifice it took for Dr. King to put his life and livelihood on the line, simply for the bettering of humankind. Simply marking this sharp transition between Martin deciding to be who he would be and Martin at the end of his life brought together a very strong emotional image of the man. And the final collage, alien to this production and the fact that it's all absolutely real stuff that actually happened, pulls together this emotional connection even further. Anyways, Miles wakes back in the real timeline and everything is back to normal. Even his friends. Hooray!
Remember, Miles, I warned you. Fooling around with the past is a dangerous thing.
You mean, you know?
Of course I know.
This has happened before, hasn't it? This happens all the time. You crazy fucking bitch.
So the kids decide what they should do to truly dedicate something beautiful to Dr. King is to go into town and paint a beautiful mural depicting all races coexisting peacefully. While there, we're shown a group of homeless men who are then ignored, just to fully drive home the fact that these kids are ignoring real modern systemic problems to instead trolley in the aspect that some things are better. The moral of the story is, don't time travel.
My friend Martin is dated. It was dated 2 weeks after it came out. When I was a kid, I knew it was dated. But for some reason, for a reason I can't really explain, it made me feel nostalgia in real time. Nostalgia for the moments that I was living for. And as an adult, I gotta be real, kinda makes me feel the same thing. It's a little bit magical in that regard.
Of course it's a no-brainer that as an adult, many of the things featured in this film aren't close to 100% of how they actually went down. It's a cartoon where some 90s kids travel back in time to the 1960s to learn about random events in King's life, shortened into brief sound bites. If there's anything that makes the movie work less, it's probably the bully and the smart girl. The bully feels underutilized as a character. They never really decide if he's a racist egghead or just a full-on jackass. Furthermore, we get these weird moments where the movie tries to develop him and then almost immediately gives up. Smart Girl seems like a terrible person, but the story is too focused on her being an example of how the world is better now to actually do anything with that side of her personality. When she enters the time travel part of the adventure, you feel like she's going to be headed somewhere, but she's ditched about 2 scenes later to do this weird, evil, cryptic alternate timeline thing. This movie is a pretty solid introduction for kids to the civil rights movement of the 1960s. It uses an interesting tactic to easily show audiences part of the story, and while we as adults might get antsy about wanting to correct minor interesting aspects about things like the Rosa Parks arrest, it's really not the sort of thing that the film needs to tell your children about. The morals of this film are at their best when they have something to do with Martin Luther King Jr., and are at their worst when they have absolutely nothing to do with anything in the story. It makes sense for the movie to tell you to seek non-violence resolutions to your conflicts, but when the movie tells you to focus on grades before sports, it feels a little bit ham-fisted. It's hard to really gauge how Miles is supposed to have been changed by all this, other than the fact that he cares more about Martin Luther King now. At the start of the film, he's not really shown to be a violent person, so when he gets told not to be a violent person, and then he turns out not to be a violent person, it feels a little bit empty. Meanwhile, his friend is the rarely seen character trope of the token white character, meaning that he really has little purpose or personality other than being a 24/7 reminder that things sure have changed a lot. Overall, if I found out that they still played this at some elementary schools, I'd be shocked but pleasantly surprised. The movie turned out a lot shorter and a lot more shuffled than I remembered, but it's a pretty fun little joyride not really worth boycotting.
Get it?